Hello and welcome to a special bonus edition of the Beyond Data Management podcast. Just like the normal ones, powered by HS GovTech. I'm Cameron Garrison. Thanks for checking this clip out today. So one of the amazing things about being able to focus on the environmental health community and talking to the various guests that we have is that it gives all of you all in EH Nation, as we've sort of affectionately called it on previous episodes, the ability to maybe see around the corner a little bit and to hear from people. We live in a time where our news cycle is it moves really fast, and it tends to focus on what is like burning and imminently about to kill you, and it doesn't actually look out into next week or beyond and show you things that are emerging that should get our attention, which probably makes it worse because we're always reacting as opposed to planning out in advance. One of those one of the things that illustrates that very well actually just happened in the last few months. So back at the end of May, we had a very long-form, wide-ranging conversation with Dr. David Dyjack, the CEO of NEHA. And one of the topics that I was fascinating. In fact, I commend it to you. If you haven't seen it, go back and take a look at that because there's a lot of really great topics, wisdom, et cetera, in there. But one of the sections of conversation was about what keeps you up at night or what's out there. And he spoke to several things at the time, all of them kind of scary, but that things that were potentially on the horizon and knowable as things are developing, but that were not getting any oxygen or attention. It just wasn't in the news. So let's start here. Let's go back to that clip from the end of May. This is Dr. David Dyjack on this show talking about the New World Screwworm.
I am not the Dark Lord, and this is not Harry Potter, but there are some pretty dark things happening around the world as it relates to human health and the environment that I think we need to be paying attention to. This is my concern in the current state of the U.S. is we may be paying attention to the wrong things.
Really?
So
what's brewing out there? So when you're an optimistic guy, right? And so, but when you're thinking deeply and maybe not so optimistic, what's troubling you?
So screwworms, Google it. Okay. Screwworms, we eradicated from this country decades ago. And for a bunch of different reasons, they're making their way back up north through Mexico en route to the United States. If my friends from the USDA are listening in right now, their blood is starting to boil because what they'll say is there's no screwworms in the US, but they are clearly on their way back. What this will mean to the agribusiness, what this will mean to pet owners, these flies lay their eggs and then their larvae hatch in any open wounds. So if you take one of your bovine, your cow, and you put a tag in their ear and it creates a little cut there, a screwworm fly can deposit an egg, and then those larvae begin to eat away at the flesh of that animal. And
wow.
That's an example. That's just one example. Okay.
So that was, again, a clip from 3 months ago, almost to the day, here on this show. And so the ostensible conversation about this is it's on the horizon and we're not paying attention to it. I know some people said it was the first time they'd heard anything about it because it wasn't in the news. So that has changed. So we're going to do quickly here. Bloomberg did a primer, and Dr. Dyjack set this up perfectly in that previous clip. What this is, and if you're eating right now, you might want to just take a quick pause, but we're going to play this quick 60-second primer that actually Bloomberg did that'll give us a little more information on what is coming.
This fly larva is capable of taking out a cow. It's called the New World Screwworm, and it is probably the scariest fly you have never heard of. The larva feeds on living animals, eating them from the inside out in just 10 days. The screwworm was one of the deadliest blights on American livestock for decades, from the 1930s to the 1980s, infecting farm animals, wildlife, even humans. And it costs ranchers hundreds of millions of dollars a year. That's over $1 billion today. After a decades-long effort by the USDA to push the screwworm south into Panama using a novel technique involving sterile flies, it was finally eradicated in the US in 1981. And since then, we haven't thought about it much, until now.
The fight to stop a flesh-eating parasite from spreading to the U.S. is ramping up.
In Mexico, where the screwworm has been eradicated since the early 1990s, more than 950 cases have been reported since the start of this year. If a major infestation runs unchecked, it could have significant impact on American consumers. Cattle supplies are already really tight, and the damages could drive up the cost of beef the way that avian flu led to record egg prices in the U.S. It would also cause billions in damages to the U.S. economy. The head of the USDA, Brooke Rollins, sent a letter to Mexico essentially accusing them of impeding the U.S.'s screwworm response efforts, threatening to shut the U.S. border to livestock. The U.S. and Mexico signed a deal on April 30th, essentially allowing the U.S. to fly USDA planes over Mexico to treat the areas worst affected by screwworms. But experts say it's going to take time and money that ranchers just don't have to fully respond to the threat of the screwworm. And all of this at a time where job cuts and insecurity in Washington has hampered government agencies. And in the meantime, the cattle industry is doing anything it can to avoid being screwed.
So this thing's real. Take out a cow in 10 days. And so we went from almost no conversation about it other than people who were paying attention, like Dr. Dyjack, to now this. This is, just from the last 7 days, an example of what the news looks like around the country.
To battle an invasive species that could threaten Texas livestock. That invasive pest has been spreading north through Mexico.
It is also putting resources into fighting a growing problem amongst Texas agriculture, the screwworm. The New World Screwworm is a type of invasive larva which burrows into the flesh of livestock.
I'm Tyler Dupnick, your neighborhood reporter in Burleson County. I'm at Skermardo Cattle Company, where they are preparing for a new threat. As the New World Screwworm makes its way into parts of southern Mexico, there is concern over its possible impact on agriculture and wildlife in our neighborhood.
Down the southern border to live cattle being shipped in from Mexico.
The USDA said a parasite called the New World Screwworm was found in a cow in southern Mexico.
Texas Parks and Wildlife Department and other animal health officials to put together a response team to combat the New World Screwworm. Officials say the worm poses a serious threat to Texas livestock and wildlife. According to the CDC, these worms are a species of fly larvae that infest and feed off the flesh of warm-blooded animals.
So yeah, it's getting talked about now, and there's actually a lot. And so thought it was only appropriate not just to talk about it and to kind of refer back to the last 90 days and how this is heated up, but to have back the not Dark Lord himself, who who literally, again, if you were paying attention here, this would have been on your radar a little bit sooner. Dr. David Dyjack, CEO of NEHA. I think how you'll hold the record, the only person to appear here in the early days of this effort for the community 3 times. So welcome back. Thanks for letting us interrupt you for a few minutes this afternoon to update on the screwworms.
Oh, sir, I don't deserve the honor of being on 3 times, and I want to say, to be completely honest, I am not some sage who can predict things. I do not predict things. What I do though is read, and I probably read 1 to 2 hours a day, primarily public health news and current events, and I am observing and surveilling what's going on around the world. I believe that what happens outside the U.S., as in the case of the screwworm, can have major impacts on the United States, on public health, and on the environment. And the screwworm is just an example of that. So I think the bottom line is I don't have any type of subscription to TikTok or to Instagram. I don't spend my time on Facebook. I read traditional science literature, maybe social science literature, and I try to keep up on the kinds of things that our members need to be aware of. The screwworm is just one of those.
It's interesting you say not spending your time on TikTok, Facebook, and all of that, because it really has created very comfortable bubbles for everyone. And it's becoming harder and harder to inject additional information into people's bubbles that way. How do you, obviously, you doctor and have training and done this for a long time, you have obviously you have your pattern, but how do you know where to go for sourcing, and if somebody was asking you, if you're just trying to stay abreast on what's out in the wider world that could come home to roost here, what would you tell somebody about where they should be looking, or are there some reliable sources or types of publications or things that you're finding reliable, that, like you said, it's not a crystal ball, it's just about taking the effort to go to it and cutting through the noise and knowing what you can trust?
So let's face it, traditional science is pretty slow and methodical. That's one of its strengths, as it tries to detect truth as we believe it to be true. And of course, all of that is calculated in probabilities. So I go to the MMWR, which is produced the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report from CDC, but I also read the popular press, and I practice something called triangulation. And that is, if I read it once, it sticks in my brain. If I read it twice, I'm like, there might be something there. And when I read it 3 times from different sources, not the same article reposted in different places, but three different reporters or 3 different articles, then I'm like, this is something I need to dig into. And that was the case with screwworm.
Very, very interesting. And it is important because a lot of things get recycled. Maybe they put a different headline on it, but you're dealing with the same source material. It's a tough world to navigate out there these days online. So how, going back, we started doing overflights to drop these flies. I think that deal was on April 30th that got announced. Again, just didn't get press. A press release of the USDA is the most distributed you can find about it. How long has this been evolving? Most things don't just come out of the clear blue sky. So I assume this has been something that was on your radar going back beyond just this spring. How long has this been something that's been on the radar of informed people?
So COVID disrupted a lot of things, and resources that may have gone to surveillance and to control of things like screwworm became diluted during COVID, including screwworm efforts, I believe, in Central America and along the Darien Pass. Couple that with cattle rustling in the Central America, lower Mexico, and you've got all the right conditions: less surveillance, less intervention, and then bad actors doing illegal things. And that's a bad combination. So this has been brewing, I'm going to say, since 22 or so. And so this is not a recent event. This development has been underway for a while. And I think the screwworm is as I understand it from reading, remember, I'm not on site, it's just a few 100 miles south of Texas. This week, again, just reading today, the FDA, I think on Tuesday, is allowing or expediting treatment for cattle and other agribusiness animals. It's been approved, I think, or will be approved in an expedited fashion, because right now there's no treatment for screwworms technically allowed in the US. But I think FDA is either this week approved novel methods or will be approving them very quickly.
Yes. And that actually, David, I think you have we actually, I think, have one of the references to that article here. If you want to pull it up from the news article deck, David, the slide, I think it's the second slide in that deck. There we go. No, that one right there. Yeah. Yep, is this one you're talking about? Yeah. HHS allowing emergency animal drugs to fight screwworm. The one thing that I didn't find in the initial reports that I was reading here from the last 36 hours is what are some of those specific medications that they're emergency authorizing?
I don't know.
Yeah, it didn't say.
So it didn't say, and I'm not sure what the thought process there is, whether they're going to approve things that are on the shelf or they're just going to approve new approaches rapidly. That's unclear from the articles that have been released. But what is really interesting in this era of federal government austerity, close to $1 billion with a B, a $1 billion facility has been greenlighted and will be constructed and erected in southern Texas to produce sterile male flies. And that, I think the Corps of Engineers is in charge of that. So when you don't practice prevention, Cameron, you pay $1 billion price tag, and that's exactly what's happening. Here's another example where you blow off prevention, don't need it, it's outside the country, we don't need to invest. And I mean, history is replete with these illustrations, sir.
It really is. And the ounce of prevention is better than the pound of the cure. It fits. And you're right. I think if you want to know how serious regulators and scientists within like the federal government are taking this, where's the money? $1 billion right now. It's hard to get them to spend. They're trying to cut. And also, like emergency authorizations, they don't love to hand those out either, do they?
It's Texas, and I exaggerated. I think it's $750 million. So, with cost overruns, I think I'm safe with the $1 billion. But let me be technically accurate. What I read, again, I'm not part of the scene, but what I've read is it's a $750 million facility that will produce something like 300 million sterile males every month or something like that.
Yeah, and again, it does feel like we missed the boat on the prevention. It's interesting that there's ties back to COVID you mentioned, and when everything kind of went haywire, because it feels like if they'd have kept on top of it, you don't need to now spend to build the plant, because I believe they're already doing this and have for years in Panama, is it, where they already are doing the sterile fly, breeding them and dropping them. So this is not new technology, is it?
It is not new technology at all. In fact, we're looking at things like this in this era of climate change with mosquitoes, using sterile male techniques, although some folks are concerned about, because there is a radioactive source that's used to make them sterile. I'm not an expert on that, but there's a lot of emotional baggage that goes along with these approaches as well. So I don't want to discount that.
Yeah, and also, though, isn't that, I'm not informed enough to say part of the problem, but these shibboleths that we everybody's got their own little trigger, and you start accumulating multiple of those, or I'm against that because of this concern. Some of them are probably valid, but you end up with a list of reasons for why you can't do something, and then you end up doing it, but after you're on your back foot because you're hit or about to be hit.
Right. Was it Winston Churchill? I love the guy because, my mother was British, and he said, you can count on the Americans to do the right thing, but only after they've tried everything else.
That's one of my favorite Churchill quotes. He's so quotable, but that one is awesome because it calls out just an undeniable truth.
It's true. I love my country. Listen, nobody get the wrong impression. I love the United States, but sometimes I'm like, I just want to smack them around a little bit. Like, come on, guys.
So I'm terrified actually to even ask you this question because, again, I wandered into it the last time, and here we are. But I know you talked about dengue and some other things, but you're mentioning mosquitoes. This is not the only thing that public health professionals and scientists have their eye on, is there? There's other scary things. And in the 90 days since we had last talked, what else is catching your attention? Again, I'm nervous to even ask, but I'm sure there's some things.
So there's a couple things. One's in the news, one probably isn't. The one in the news is the Legionella outbreak in Brooklyn. I think that there have been roughly a half a dozen people who have died. Over 100 have become sick. With climate change and the urbanization of the planet, and less attention perhaps being paid to prevention, which we just talked about, these cooling towers on buildings can disseminate water droplets, which contain Legionella bacteria. Anybody walking by a facility, a commercial building in downtown New York is potentially at risk. And frankly, that's probably true for most of the country. New York is just a hot spot right now. So that is one example. As people spend more time indoors, and they are because of wildfires and extreme heat and extreme weather, there's going to be more ventilation systems that are going to be installed in buildings that historically hadn't needed them, like in the Northwest. And so there's a whole new generation of building managers that are going to have to educate themselves or avail themselves to education around best practices in HVAC systems. I think the thing that's not in the news that's really kind of frightening to me is flesh-eating bacteria, Vibrio vulnificus, and it's in Louisiana. It's in, I think, Florida right now. It's associated with warm, shallow waters that you might find at the beach, at the golf resorts. And if you've got an open wound, this is not the time in history to be walking around outside, whether it's screwworms or Vibrio. I mean, these are bad actors and people die from this.
Yeah, Vibrio, actually, if you look at little local items in news, there are actually quite a few. And again, they don't usually get picked up or do anything, but it's actually not just a handful of isolated incidents, is it? In fact, we had somebody in Charlotte, where I live, that it's been a little bit now, but we have a big whitewater center here in Charlotte. In fact, the Olympic team trained there before the last Olympics, and a kid died, and it was from Vibrio. And that one was weird because isn't it normally associated with like water that's sort of still or sitting? Or is that just a misnomer? Because the Whitewater Center has a lot of moving water, and it still got into the wound of a child, and they passed.
Well, so let me ask, you're not talking about Naegleria, are you? That's an amoeba, and I believe there was a case in a whitewater rafting facility in the Carolinas.
You're right. That was the brain amoeba, was it?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
You're talking about the flesh eating. It gets into an open wound.
That's correct.
And just destroys you. What is the treatment for that? Like, it doesn't sound like it is like curable without at least some damage.
I believe, again, I'm not a clinician, but I believe there's antibiotics, although our arsenal of antibiotics is being sorely tested these days as we get antibiotic resistance from different two different types of antibiotic treatment. But there's a handful of things. You may have read Gene Hackman's wife passed away from hantavirus.
Yeah.
And that is a little more common than we might want to believe. And then with climate change, what we have are extremes of weather. So we'll have a lot of rain. There's an explosion of rodents, and then it gets really dry and desiccated, and the viruses associated with these rodents then can become airborne. And it's problematic when you're cleaning up the garage or cleaning up some outbuilding and you're using a broom to broom clean or broom dust out of a place, and all those little particles become airborne. So the world is changing really quickly. We need to pay attention to this. Someone could say, well, that's pretty rare. It's not a problem until it's a problem, Cameron. And if it's your son or your daughter that's affected, that's where it comes home to roost.
Yeah. And I wonder if part of it is how would you phrase this? The curse of affluence. Or maybe it's just, again, I love the country too. I don't want to be anywhere else. I live here. But there's a bit of an arrogance, isn't there, to general society, where it's like you almost think of these other places around the world as the third world or other, and you almost feel like not in our house, like we're too advanced for that. But that is probably part of the problem, isn't it? Because we actually are pretty lax about thinking that we're subject to the same forces and bugs that the rest of the world is.
And that is changing really rapidly. So first, I am not going to assign attribution like we're lazy. I'm not going to do that. For most of my professional and civil network, these folks have never been exposed to this. I mean, who's ever talked about screwworms in your life?
No, I think the first or second time I'd ever heard about it was when you mentioned it in May.
Yeah. So this is what society needs to deal with. Is the world is changing, And what was out there is now in here. The climate, are you a gardener? You know that the gardening zones have changed.
Yeah, and you're growing different things now that
you're
you never
growing
did.
different things. Yep. And so we actually have this conversation at home. Do you think we can grow orchids outside? Do you think, I mean, because it literally is, things have changed and it's the rapid change. And organisms, Darwinism is alive and well. If I can't make it in Panama, I'm going to fly up to the US where there's a lot of cows, right? And so if I'm a screwworm, this is just evolution, or I would say microevolution underway. And so this is part of my job, I feel, when I'm on podcasts like yours, is just to mention screwy things. And by the way, I want you to know my own staff listened to the podcast and made fun of me. So this is a true story. They made fun of me. They're like, really? Screwworms? I have it in writing. So if you don't believe me, I'll forward you the message. Okay. They're like, you couldn't come up with something else? I'm like, I think this is important. But yeah, if you want to laugh at me, that's fine.
That's why you're the CEO. That though it is, and we're growing things here now that would normally be grown in like a tropical climate, right? It's just the whole Etch-a-Sketch is shaking up.
So it is. So that's present tense. I'm glad you use present tense. It is shaking up right now. And for those of us in public health, we're taking a beating reputationally for a bunch of reasons. And I would like to extend my profound sadness to all my colleagues in Atlanta whose building was shot at, and for the law enforcement officer that was killed. I am profoundly saddened by that. But this is just part of the changing landscape. And our job is to raise awareness and to provide people both emotional and scientific assurance that we can handle this.
Yeah, and that was an incident, like people resorting to, it's really, really vile. And yeah, we extend our sympathies as well, because that should just never happen. But yeah, it did, and recently. So I think with the screwworm, obviously, like Texas A&M, you have Vector, but you have agriculture departments, obviously in Texas, heavily involved. What are, of all these things that you're talking about, which ones do you think, like the environmental health departments, are most likely to have a role in being able to help either mitigate or deal with as you look at this emerging threat picture out there? Obviously, some of these are going to be more directly impactful to those professionals than others. As you sit there in your chair at NEHA and you're like, what can we do? How do you think about that?
So let me speak to your constituents on this podcast. You folks are the chief science officers for your health department. You know the private sector because you regulate them. You know daycares, you know recreational facilities, you know recreational waters. I could go on and on. You speak the local language, you know local subculture where you live. You are the chief science officers, and it is your job to surveil, either formally or informally, and raise awareness among your network about emerging conditions that your communities need to be aware of. And most importantly, in your role as chief science officer, be ready to pony up solutions. And I think if you do that, you will be just embraced as a scientist and embraced as a professional. And I would applaud you if you were to do those things. If I could add, Cameron, I was blessed to have gone to American Samoa last week. We visited the Department of Health and the Division of Environmental Health Services, and it's led by a woman named Eileen. She is just nothing short of an amazing professional. We went in to see the governor, Cameron, and when Eileen spoke, the governor listened. We went in to speak strategy with the director of the Department of Health, and when Eileen spoke, the room got quiet and everyone paid attention to her. That person has established herself as the voice of reason and the voice of protection for American Samoa. And that's an example of a chief science officer in action.
I saw the pictures, and I think we actually may have one here that your team got us. We'll look into that. But they're actually very forward thinking. In fact, if you were to say in the blind, which agencies do you think are upgrading their technology and really moving forward to the cutting edge? American Samoa is probably not in the top of anybody's list there. Yet right now they are in the process of transforming and going to data and reporting that's cloud-based. So I can confirm that some of what we didn't meet with the governor, but you're right. They're really forward thinking there. And also to your point, when your staff was like, screwworm, that's the best you could come up with. Isn't it also true to your point about they're the chief science officer and they need to speak up? Don't be cowed or intimidated by the fact that maybe no one else is talking about something, right? Because I think there is this human nature of, I don't want to come off like a tinfoil hat person.
Right.
And so you kind of have to boldly, without fear or favor, speak what you're seeing, don't you? And not worry about if the herd is there yet, so to speak.
Well, we talked about this during the last podcast. Relationship building is really important. And if people trust you, they will listen to what you have to say, and you shouldn't be offended if they blow you off. The person that laughed at me about bringing up screwworms, I have an enormous respect for. I think he was just needling me a little bit. But as a chief science officer, if you develop a reputation for being solution-based, here's our problem and here's what we recommend that we do, right? So it's not just here's a problem, now what? And this is what we recommend. I believe by showing up and speaking up and being a member of the community and being a trusted source of information, I think there's no end to the influence an environmental health professional can have. This is why I love this profession so much. It is potentially the single most important part of a health department.
Yes. Yeah. 100%. And I think you actually, when you were out in Americans, but by the way, I'm jealous. So the team at HS has been working with them, but I haven't been out there physically. It looked like a really great experience and trip. And I think you also toured maybe some facilities out there, like some manufacturing or processing facilities as well.
We did. We were blessed to be able to go to Starkist, which is I think all of the canned tuna and packaged tuna that comes out of that Starkist facility in American Samoa comes to the U.S. and the U.S. military. It makes up an important part of the school lunch program where they have tuna as part of that. And for me to see manufactured food right there at the ground level, we watched the boats unloading the tuna and got to see the entire cycle. And they don't waste any of that fish, by the way. All of it is used in one product or another, including pet food, fish oil, and as well as the tin tuna that you're familiar with.
Wow, that must have been fascinating, especially to get to see it basically from sea to can or however they package it up.
Yeah, they were very kind to have given us a tour, very gracious, and I'm over the moon. You know, I'm a classically trained industrial hygienist, and to be back in a hard hat and with earplugs, and I mean, that's my environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we're going to pull up. They're trying to load the pictures. I think we had a glitch with them, so sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries.
We did have a couple. There was one, actually, I didn't realize we go to American Samoa that you get a lei like you do in Hawaii. There was a great picture of you in a classroom type setting, and you had the lei around your neck. So
yeah,
quite a departure from the bow tie.
Yes, sir. I'm keeping everyone like confused. It's like no bow tie today. I just have fun with the dress code. Yeah, as long as it's respectful, try to keep people guessing.
I love it. Do you have any other big trips or conferences or speaking engagements coming up this fall that are notable?
Yeah, I'm really excited to go to Texas. That should be to the Texas Environmental Health Association meeting, and I've been invited to do a keynote at the Canadian Institute of Public Health Inspectors, sci-fi.
Oh, you do sci-fi. That's
yeah,
great.
and don't tell anyone now that I'm on a podcast, but I've accepted a speaking gig in Alaska, in Anchorage, for the Alaskan Environmental Health Association. And let me tell you, you talk about unique kinds of challenges in the practice of environmental health. If you can figure it out in Alaska, you can figure it out anywhere. They are the epicenter for climate change. There's a lot of profound changes to that environment there. They also have a lot of bushmeat that's brought to the hospital there in Anchorage, and all of the issues associated with processing that. Like if someone shoots, I'm going to just say a moose, I'm just making this up, they may donate that meat to the hospital there in Anchorage. And of course, that moose meat is accepted and it's processed respectfully and under sanitary conditions. But that's a little bit of a different kind of facility than one might consider a Star-Kissed tuna operation, canning operation.
Yeah, you're right. Alaska is a totally different thing altogether. In fact, so years ago when I was at DHD, they actually did have the honor of getting to go there a couple times because they were doing a system implementation. They still have, and I had to, like I said, excuse me, they have some places that are still so remote, not served by roads, that they have to put the inspectors onto bush planes just to go out and do the inspections. Now, if that's changed in the last few years, then information may be dated. But yeah, they have so many challenges that just wouldn't even occur to somebody in the rest of the country. Also, they have, Russian bombers testing out the airspace from time to time. So it's a wild place.
It is. It's also really sobering as we look at the fisheries there, and some of them are changing dramatically, and those subsistence communities are really suffering in some cases because of species that they used to count on for food stock have either moved on or greatly reduced in numbers. And so it's a pretty very sobering experience to go there if you move outside the big urban areas.
Yeah, in fact, I think there's some towns there where, to your point about the environment just doesn't support how they fed themselves for generations, that like literally towns are dying, or little villages, because the primary source is no longer, environment's not hospitable to it anymore. Actually, Alaska would make a great documentary, Environmental Health Alaska. Sorry, way far afield, but like there is a lot there that would shock even grizzled professionals who have done it for a long time in the lower 48. So I'd already kept you longer than we promised, but we talked recently with Ashley Miller, who's someone in your organization on your team, and she had mentioned how excited she was for the app coming out for the self-assessment and standards. Do you have an idea? I think she said it would be going into beta soon. I think that's something that's going to be really well received and is really exciting. I know I can't wait to get a peek in it.
So I adore Ashley. She's one of our stellar employees, and sadly, I don't want to misspeak. I don't know when that beta version will be available, but I'll certainly get back with you.
That'll be great. I think that's something that's been long overdue. And hey, I make sure when you go to Alaska, get some pictures and stuff, because that's going to be great. Also, a long flight, so get up and pace. Can you even go there nonstop from Orlando, or do you have to go like to Minneapolis or Denver or Seattle?
How many stops? It's probably Orlando, Denver, Anchorage. That would be my guess.
Yeah, probably.
That would be the way to go. But the meeting's in November, and so it's going to be.
It's going to be dark and cold.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, it's a privilege to be there, and they are such cool and interesting human beings. I can't wait to visit them.
Well, you're a learned doctor and smarter than me, but safety tip, I think it's McKinley and they've renamed it, but the big mountain there. Denali, yes. I think it had been named different. But anyway, I was there when it was still pretty cold. Like the sun was setting at like 12:30 in the afternoon. It was weird. But I was like, I'm going to go up there because I could see it. And so I took a day trip, drive. That was a really bad idea. I just had a rental car. And
really?
Yeah, I was an idiot. I was young. This is like probably 18, 19 years ago.
Last year. Oh, okay.
And so I go up there in my rental car and I'm driving up the road. I got stuck in a snowdrift. And of course it's dark, it's cold, and there's no traffic. It's Alaska, it's rural. And the nicest person after a couple hours comes by in a proper vehicle equipped with chains on the tires and pulled me out. But it's possible I wouldn't be here today. I would be a skeleton on Denali. So yeah, just don't do anything crazy without the right vehicle when you're there. We do have the pictures. The technical glitch is solved. So this is from Dr. Dyjack's trip out there. There he is in the lake. Could have confused it as being in Hawaii at a quick glance. And yeah, really great group out there in American Samoa. And you know what? I think it says a lot about you and about Niha. There's no easy way to get there, right? It's a long trip. And the fact that you guys will go anywhere, including the difficult to get places, it speaks really highly, because not everybody would make that trip.
Sir, we believe of going to the end of the road. There is no place too remote. There's no individual practitioner that we don't want to touch and to provide them technical support if we can, whether it's by Zoom or in person. Our commitment is to every environmental health professional, no matter where they work, in the military, in the private sector, or the traditional government sector.
That's awesome. So in closing, and we do this in love and in jest. So we started off with the clip of you from May saying, "I am not the Dark Lord." And so our crack team was...
Oh, no.
Your team... The AI begs to differ. But you got a nice smile on your face for a Dark Lord. So, hey, sorry, I hope you don't mind. They thought, that'll be funny. I'm like, okay, we'll show it to him.
So, Cameron, what comes around goes around. I want you to know
that.
That's fair.
Yeah, and you'll spring it on me at the very worst time, like in a Niha or something. Yeah, fair. I'll be prepared.
You started this.
I did. I look 3 times here already. Thank you so much. And also just to the organization, like we had just talked to Ashley, Evan, we spoke to him at the mobile booth there in Niha, and that's gotten thousands and thousands of views. Like, it's really, it's a really great team that you've built. And anytime you talk to any of them, none of them are bored or phoning it in. The passion just comes through, and you're doing something really special with Niha, and in tumultuous times, it's long overdue and needed.
Thanks, and they get all the credit for being themselves. I'm just lucky to be associated with them, Cameron.
You're making good personnel decisions. So thank you for joining us again. We'll definitely have you back in the future, and hopefully, though, we don't meet next time because now the flesh-eating Vibrio is everywhere, and we have to have you back to explain how you were so right again. So hopefully under better circumstances.
Yes, sir. Hey, nice to see you today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dyjack. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
All right, that will do it for this sort of special bonus edition of the Beyond Data Management podcast. Thank you all so much for watching. And again, I think we will keep trying to bring you the leading luminaries from the field and conversations with those people. And hopefully together, we can all be working together and maybe be a little less reactionary in the future and get ahead of some of these things. We're going to need some help. God help us. But a lot of value in those types of conversations. So thanks so much to Dr. Dyjack for joining us again for a few minutes there. For all of us here at the Beyond Data Management podcast, I'm Cameron Garrison. We will see you next time for the next episode.